So anyways, I'm Jason Maynard. I'm a senior multi-domain architect focused on cybersecurity for Cisco. I've been with Cisco for about 9 years now, and solely focused on security. And when I first created this deck, cat and mouse, and we'll talk about that in a second, they said, well, you have to have a slide about you. So remember the WebEx room for questions you guys can go to. And so I said, okay, well, I'll take 20 minutes of the 45 minutes, talk about me. I'm kidding. But I had to include it about me. So I've been doing this for a while, right? Been at Cisco for 9 years. Previous to Cisco, I worked for a partner integrator where I led network and security teams. And then previous to that, I worked as an end user, right? Consume the technologies and leverage the technologies as many of you do today. Spoke at multiple different events, including B-Sides, where it gets a little bit more technical and a little more deep. I collect certifications like people collect stamps. I've always been a big believer if I have to learn a technology or capability of some sort, I'll put the 40% more in to get something for, I guess, I don't know. But yeah, and so what do I do kind of outside of the security stuff? Nothing. No, I do stuff. I live in Canada. In the Rockies. I've got a place where I stay and I use Starlink, whether you like it or not. It's a phenomenal technology because I had traditional satellite that was, very high latency and not a lot of throughput. And so anytime I'm not working in security, I'm out in the Rockies doing stuff. And I'll show you a couple pictures in a second. The other thing that I do is a hobby, but kind of really directly related to work, is I have a YouTube channel where I create how to very quick, easy, follow this, and you'll drive a certain outcome 100% of the time. I don't miss anything. Like if you need a CA from Microsoft to sign something, I don't skip that part. I show you how to do that piece too. These are some of the pictures of where I live. So that's about 10 or 15 minutes from where my place is. Those are obviously bears, right? Yeah. And those are not taken from the web, right? Those are taken from my iPhone. So anyways, pretty beautiful place to be. And now with hybrid work or work from home, anybody can work anywhere they want to. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of an intro. We'll do the analysis perspective. So we'll get the perspective of the analysts themselves, kind of level set a little bit. And then we'll get into endpoint detection and response, extended detection and response. And then if time permits, and I feel that it will, but I may talk too much, I'll do a demo. Okay, so endpoint detection and response. Who here is using EDR today? Okay, so endpoint detection and response is great. The problem with endpoint detection and response is two things. One is it has to be installed on something. Right? So if you don't have the ability to install an agent on an IoT device, a printer, CT scanner, you don't have any EDR capabilities on those devices. So it's only as good as the endpoint that it's installed on, but it also doesn't tell the whole story. It tells a really good story on the endpoint, but it doesn't tell a complete story. And this is why you see things like infections continue to reoccur. So you go into your endpoint detection response, you learn about a whole bunch of stuff, and then from there, you go ahead and maybe add some mitigating controls somewhere. But you may have missed that the asset may have been compromised through another means, and therefore that control is not in place, and therefore reinfection reoccurs. Or you reinstall the operating system and then restore the backup file, and again, reinfection occurs. Where exactly did the compromise begin? Very rarely it happens on the endpoint that you're investigating, sometimes, but very rarely it's probably somewhere else, right? And that you got an alert or some type of trigger to give you an idea that this is something that you need to investigate. What controls were bypassed or evaded? How is the adversary able to continue to wreak havoc within the environment? And does it tell the whole story? And the short answer is it doesn't. So EDR is phenomenal capability, but it does lack the big picture. And so this is where we start getting into extended detection and response. This is going to give us a full perspective of what actually is happening in the environment. And it's going to include things like automation and orchestration, or hopefully it does. And I've had this discussion before, and I can do it from an agnostic view as opposed to a Cisco perspective. Today, obviously, it's 100% Cisco focused. But at the end of the day, you need a tool that's going to help you go beyond that endpoint detection and response capability that you have in the environment. And so I look at XDR, again, another marketing term, as detection and response on steroids, because it does pull the full picture together. And we're going to walk through an incident. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to walk through an incident as if this happens, and I want you to think about how you would go about doing this in your own environment today. Who is using XDR or SOAR type capabilities? Again, raise your hands if you want. Yeah, so not very many, right? And honestly, the adversary continues to advance their capabilities. And so as defenders, we need technologies or capabilities that are going to enhance our ability to detect and ultimately respond. If you look at anything around security resilience, there's a lot of hype around resilience today. In order to achieve that, you got to make sure that you have the tools in place, regardless of the resilience program that you're focused on, whether it be operations, finance, or whatever. Security plays a strong role in all of that. And something like XDR is going to help you maintain and ensure that resilience is always achieved. So we're going to level the playing field, and we're going to hopefully give the defenders an upper hand, maybe, right? But at least even it out a little bit. All right, analysis perspective. Anybody here know Locard's exchange principle? Some do. Well, I didn't before either. So, but anyways, Locard's, he's, I guess, the Sherlock Holmes of France, right? He pioneered forensic science or forensic for crime, right? And basically what he states is that in order for, there's something that's going to happen. If a criminal goes into a location and does something, he either takes something from the crime scene or leaves something behind, right? Those are two things that are inevitable. You can't get away from it. And so the good thing about that is that there's some data there. Some of the simpler stuff, right? Like, a fingerprint, that's been well defined for a very, very long time. But even more complicated stuff, like a hair follicle falling out of your beard into a fiber carpet, right? Very hard to find that. So, but if you have tools that'll help you discover where that hair follicle or some blood that's not visible to the human eye has spattered somewhere, now you got a piece of data, right? And you can use that data. Now, does that mean the person committed the crime? No. But if you do investigate the individual and have an interview with them and they said they've never been there before, now you know they're lying to you, at the very least, right? Or most likely lying to you. Doesn't mean they've committed it. So what we want to be able to do is find the hair follicle, right? Or the spatter of blood that you can't see with the eye. Because these are the pieces that are going to help us maintain things like zero trust and push the adversary outside of our environment and then put mitigating controls in place. Now, this is not Pietcha. I know this is old. If you want to see log4j and things like that, you can certainly Google that or go to my channel. I've got a log4j kind of scenario around defensive capabilities on top of what CISA recommends. But the reason why I picked this one is it's interesting. It's got a lot of nice little tidbits in it, right? So first off, 2017, the exploit was leaked, allegedly stolen by shadow brokers from the NSA as a tool that they used to get information or access to systems, allegedly, right? It may not be allegedly anymore, but I'm sticking with it. And so that happened in April 2017. Microsoft released a patch a month previous, and if you patched 100% of everything, you're immune to the attack. Now, how many, you don't have to raise your hands to this, but how many people patch 100% of everything? Very few, right? It's difficult, especially depending on your business and what time of year it is. You might not be able to do so. And so what they did was, what was interesting was the adversary had the ability, once they compromised or took advantage of that vulnerability, they were able to harvest credentials out of memory, okay? And then log into systems that you may have already patched. So that was interesting, right? That was a clever piece there. And I think it was Mimikatz or Mimikat-like capability that they leveraged. But there was a bunch of noise that was created, right? So ransomware is in your face, you know it's there, right? Because it's telling you make a payment, right? Or your data is going to be gone. So you know the adversary's in your organization. But most adversaries, if they're in there, most likely they're not looking to put ransomware there first, right? They're probably trying to steal some intellectual property or some data that's very valuable to them. And then at the last moment, they might want to encrypt the drives and maybe get paid, right, using ransomware. Or they use it for extortion. But the bottom line is there's all kinds of other telemetry data there. So this was a supply chain attack, like very many that we're seeing today. You got vulnerable systems, so there's vulnerability, system hygiene. You've got credential harvesting. You've got WMI and PS exec elements that are being leveraged. You got lateral movement, right? You got command and control. You've got command line arguments and SMB remote code execution, to name a few. So all of them provide a little bit of information that could allow you as a defender or an analyst to determine whether or not something bad is happening in the environment. You don't have to block the adversary at the firewall, right? You want to block as far away from the asset that they're trying to compromise, don't get me wrong. But all you have to do is disrupt anywhere in the attack cycle, and you make that attack moot, right? Because they can't be successful. If I'm using PowerShell to get access to an asset or do a reverse shell back to my command and control system, and I don't have PowerShell enabled on that asset, the adversary has to use another tool, and that takes a lot more work. So now we've got these other telemetry sources. And so this is the blood spattering or the hair follicle that's falling on the floor, or fingerprint or whatever you want to use. But these are the pieces that we can certainly leverage. So lateral movement. How many here do baseline their network and know what it looks like when normal traffic is actually traversing the environment versus when the adversary's in the environment that bypass your controls and is now moving laterally within the network? Right? Your controls are going to fail. If you look at resilience, they talk about assume breach from a security perspective. If you assume breach, then you can build up a resilience program that allows you to continue to function even if you do get breached. So if an adversary gets on this machine, if I'm using something like microsegmentation, right, maybe they can't move laterally. They can't scan that layer 2 network that they're on, right? They can't move anywhere. All they can do is move outbound potentially. They've got to cross a layer 3 hop, and if they do, now I have controls in place, right? That might be able to detect what they're doing. So what I want you guys to do is think about this today, right? I should look down here, but think about 2 questions, right? What are the 2 main questions? I was going to do Slido, but I thought I'm really crunched for time. But 2 questions that you typically ask when an incident happens. Anybody want to shout it out? Okay, I'll give you the first one. I know I didn't give you enough time. But do we have protection mechanisms in place? So if you're reading a Talos blog and you see a threat or a campaign, you're analyzing it, the first thing you want to know is if you have defensive capabilities, right, against that threat. Because that's the first thing someone's going to ask you, are we at risk? And you're going to say, I don't know. I'll get back to you. So we want to know if we have defensive capabilities in place. And the other thing is we want to know whether or not we've already been compromised or hit. So think about how you do that today. Are you waiting for your AV product on your endpoint to tell you about it? Right? Might be difficult at best. So the clock starts, right? The countdown. Now this will start over every time you see it, but anyways, just assume it keeps going. I couldn't figure out how to sync it, right? But anyways, okay, so now we've got that kind of established. Let's talk a little bit about endpoint detection response. So we've all started with EPP. So think of things like Symantec or McAfee, or, traditional AV products on the endpoint. Lots of features, pretty capable in their day, right? the adversary starts coming out with things called APT and all this cool guru stuff, right? And they were able to bypass static-based or simple signature-based solutions, right? And then what happened is the market grew that says, okay, if we assume breach, we need to be able to detect and respond threats that are realized in our environment. And so therefore, I need something that will tell me about that. And so this was an add-on, typically, right? So you'd have your AV product doing that, commodity-based scrubbing, and then you get an EDR product that might provide some advanced malware capabilities from a defensive perspective, and then provide the full detection and response. If you do get compromised, what happens? Then you get EPP EDR. So what happened is you folks came to companies like Cisco and said, why do I need an AV agent and I need an EDR agent, right? Can't I have one agent that does it both? And so that's where Cisco is today, right? So Cisco provides EPP, endpoint protection, as well as endpoint detection and response. And so with a solution like that, there's going to be some capabilities that you want in a product. And so it's not going to be based on a single engine platform. Can't. It's impossible. You're not going to be very successful with that. And so you want a layered approach to security. Just like you build out your defensive architecture, you've got firewalls, email security, web proxy, all of those elements that you have, endpoint protection, you got network behavioral analytics looking for the bad person, right? You have all of that in place because you're hoping that if they get through the front doors and as they move closer to the asset they compromise, you mitigate hopefully somewhere in that path. Same thing with endpoint detection. When it hits the endpoint, if you're relying on one engine to provide you all the security mechanisms you require on that endpoint, you put yourself at risk. And so you want to make sure that you've got things that can do SHA-256 matching. So this is very simple. Take a SHA-256, throw it up in the cloud or on-prem, but typically the cloud for most customers, and run it against a full data set. Not an optimized data set that's running on your endpoint because it's going to slow it down if it was a full data set, but a full data set powered by cloud, right? And so you run it against everything. So even if tools are reused, you're going to be able to capture them here. The other things are examples, so static analysis. So looking for behaviors like the P headers, DLL imports, compile locations, and see if there's something similar to that to other patterns that would match to bad or good. Dynamic analysis, this is where you get into sandboxing, so taking a file or unknown file and putting it into a VM, detonate that VM, let the file execute and monitor all its behaviors. We'll talk a little bit about that. You want threat intelligence, right, regardless. And so, it's funny because I have a lot of conversations with customers, obviously, and some of the things that I hear is, they're telling me the network's not relevant, right? They're telling me this, they're telling me that. The network's still relevant. It provides tremendous data. So I always look at that, and you take it with a grain of salt. When someone's saying you don't need something, it's probably because they don't offer it, right? They don't have that capability, most likely. They're trying to tell you that you don't need it because I can't give it to you, and I know the other person can. The data in the network is tremendously valuable, especially if you can do things like encrypted traffic analytics and even not having to decrypt the payload to examine it to determine a bad behavior is taking place. So still valuable. And so when you think about threat intelligence as a whole, you've got to think about Cisco's base, right? Everybody's chest pounding about all the signals that they get. But just put it in perspective a little bit, right? We've got Clam AV, we've got Snort, we've got Spam Cop. There's all kinds of open source or community-based platforms that Cisco has or owns, as well as all the telemetry of data that they get from ISPs to your network. And I'm not talking about your data, I'm just talking about the telemetry data that's shared, right, to see whether there's a threat somewhere in the environment. And then be able to take that all in, make sense of it, and push defensive capabilities across a stack of technologies. Exploit prevention, so randomization of memory. So if an adversary is looking for a certain location in memory to execute arbitrary code, when they go look for that place in memory, guess what? Well, it's randomized, so it's going to fail. And in fact, because we've randomized the memory structure, we've also created a honeypot to detect the adversary trying to go to the old location to execute arbitrary code. You got a rules engine, right? Behavioral. If you start encrypting drives, you certainly want to stop that behavior. Even if your defensive capabilities fail, you want some preventative mechanism to stop it from proceeding. So maybe something like, oh, all of a sudden one file is getting encrypted, 2, 3, okay, let's kill that process. Signature-based AV protection, why not, right? Commodity-based, gets rid of the noise. Fuzzy fingerprinting, so this is where we're getting into polymorphism, right? And being able to, if that's even a word, but polymorphic malware, so this is where we pack, unpack, and repack the file. Cloud-based IOCs, again, cloud's gonna provide tremendous amount of intelligence, but these are gonna be more focused on behavior. Device flow correlation, I was always told this when I was growing up, you are who you hang with. Same thing, if you're a file that hangs out with a bad bunch of IPs, right? You're probably bad too, right? So probably not allowed to hang out with them anymore. I hope everyone else was told that too. No? Okay. System protection, so LSAS, for example, right? It's a system process, and if somebody's trying to dump LSAS, we probably want to stop that. Script protection, again, think of PowerShell and all the scripts that are available to you. Behavioral protection. And then you get retrospection. Anybody know? Okay, who doesn't know what retrospect? Nah, maybe that's a dumb question too. Anyways, retrospection, I don't want to call somebody out. Retrospection is the ability to go back in time. So if you think about it, any technology that's out there today, once they know it's bad, they're gonna block everything net new. That's easy. That's the easy part. Everybody does that. But what we do is actually go back in time. So if you got an email in 3 days ago and we don't, even if we had to detonate the file in a sandbox, review it, everything else, give you back a disposition, it still comes back unknown because that's still gonna happen from time to time and then turns bad after the second or third day after you've downloaded it, right? It's now bad. We actually tell you about that infection. We go, listen, look back this way because 3 days ago it came in as unknown and it's in your environment. So now we might want to know, did someone execute that file or payload, right? But it allows us to focus our remediation efforts there. Observe behavior of clean and unknown files of all of them, right? So we don't just look at bad samples and monitor them. We look at clean and unknown. Why? Because clean and unknown can go bad, right? And maybe help with things like retrospection. Quarantine malicious files, observe interactions between them. Hit a button. Yeah, so observe interactions between them. It's very similar to what I said of files reaching out to a known bad IP as an example. Network traffic to isolate C2, so we want to monitor that. And then you get into the response capabilities. So some of this was prevention, some of this was detection, and now some of this is going to be focused on response. So you get forensic snapshotting. You want to make sure that you're looking at isolation, no matter where the asset is. You've got orbital advanced search, so the ability to pull data from an endpoint as needed and search your entire organization, say for log4j, and you're looking for packages that are at risk. Wouldn't it be nice to enter in a query and search this whole room and tell me exactly what assets have log4j that's at risk? Automation, obviously, and threat response. All right. So we're gonna go through an incident here. I'm probably gonna have to speed up, I'm thinking. But what happens when you see this? So somebody opens up a ticket and gives you a screenshot and says, I don't know what happened, but this happened. What do you do? That was the expert. Whoever said it, that's an expert answer, for sure. Or I'm on PTO, right? That's the other answer. No, but what do you do, right? Resume.exe. Well, we're gonna go through it. All right, so what we know right now is this. We know that resume.exe command prompt showed up on John Doe's asset. We know that asset is a Windows 10 machine. Why? Because it's a user that actually went out and told us about the incident, and so we can look up their asset tag and we know it's Windows 10. File name's resume.exe. I don't even have a SHA at this point. No SHA-256 to analyze or anything like that. And the user doesn't know how it happened. It just happened. The good thing is John reported it, right? Because how many people would have just clicked that box and moved on, right? We don't know if 10 other people got this same thing. We don't know that, right? Because who's going to want to take the time to create a ticket and say, look at this? Most people are gone. Okay. So what do you think our next step is in this investigation? I just showed it out. Well, you can go to AMP and look at that's not a bad idea. If you have AMP. But think about this with your current endpoint product today. So we're still focused on EDR, right? And so that's exactly it. So I would go in and search for resume.exe. And again, if it's a little bit small in the back, don't worry about it. I'm walking you through it. And then you can obviously look at this at your leisure. And then what I get to see is a couple things. I see a retrospective event. Do you know why I'm seeing a retrospective event here? Because if I wasn't, I wouldn't have anything to show you, right? Because it would have been blocked. So that's why it's a retrospective event. But we can see here, now looking at the data, we can see it was created by PowerShell. Okay, so now we've got a SHA-256 that we didn't have, and how did we get that? Well, AMP, as an example, provided us that capability. Next thing we want to do is what happened here with PowerShell? What's that relationship between PowerShell and resume.exe? And what we end up getting is the command line arguments. So now we know that PowerShell somehow got executed, went to ret.space using port 8080. Should that be allowed out? Probably not, but maybe, right? If you had a proxy, it may not have gotten out. That's where these defensive capabilities layered comes in play. But it went to ret.space, it pulled down resume.exe, and then executed that payload or started that payload. So that's what happened. Can you do that today with your existing platforms? Again, just a question. And then I get a cloud-based IOC. So there's some things that we can do defensively here, but just assume here that we've got a cloud-based IOC. And what it's telling us now is that they've triggered, based on this, an IOC tied to a macro. And a macro can obviously be used in nefarious ways, right, to do things. And so from this, we start getting a pretty good picture, right? We know now to look back a little bit further, and we can see WinWords involved. Obviously, we've got a macro, so there's got to be some type of Microsoft element there. And so now, not only do we know the 4 things that we talked about just previously, but we know PowerShell's involved in the creation of resume.exe, connected to ret.space, we even know the port 8080. Cloud-based IOC also indicated a macro was involved in this, right? So what do you think we do now? Is that good? That's pretty good data, right? We know a lot at this point. Are we done? Call it a day? It's Friday already anyway, because this is when this stuff happens, right? It's always Friday before a holiday or the Christmas break or whatever it is, right? So are we done? No. What do we want to know? Anybody? Yeah, where it came from. Yeah. 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 Okay, no more answers. They're giving away the whole story. What's that?
I'd isolate the box now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. You definitely want to think about the risk. The thing about defense is it's interesting because if you're too early, you put the defensive capability in, the adversary might have something to look for that when you put that control in knows that they've been caught and now they do something malicious. So I'm going to do this real quick. I know I don't have enough time. But I got a call from Microsoft support. It wasn't Microsoft. It was, I could tell it was some kitchen somewhere with lots of people in it. And they told me I had a virus and went through the whole thing. And I went through the whole mock-up with them and I recorded it, right? I put up a VM and the VM actually was called PC compromised. And they went through and they said, oh, look, see, I told you you're compromised. Did you name your PC compromised? I said, no, I'm a stupid accountant. I don't know how to do anything. I got it from the store that way. They go, they wouldn't have called it. So this time they really thought they caught somebody bad on my machine. But anyways, they went through the payment structure. I started entering all the details down. And I said, I got cold feet at this point. I'm done. I'm done computers. I'm retired. I told them I was a retired accountant when we were going through getting to know each other. And then at the end, they went into start, run, syskey, put in a password, and rebooted my box. It was a VM, so I reverted the snap, right? But anyways, you got to be careful with the defensive capability is my point there, right? Because sometimes the adversary is looking for things that's preventing their ability and maybe something new executes. Not that it's a bad idea, but it's something to keep in mind. So as we're going back, we look, and now we see Explorer.exe has a relationship with Windward. And now we get to see the command line prompt that was passed there. So now we have Outlook, or do we know Outlook? Did I just give it away? Yeah, I did. Anyways, we got Windward that was launched. Why? Because of, when you clicked on something, like a .m file, Explorer launches Windward for you, and that's how it all happens. And the macro got executed, then PowerShell got executed, then went to ret.space, 8080, downloaded ret.space, downloaded resume.exe and executed the payload. All right. So now we know a little bit more. We know a macro, we know resume.m, and then our next thing is what's next? Yeah? Resume.m, right? We want to know what's the relationship there. So what we do then is scroll back a little bit more, and we see resume.m, and we can see it's created by Outlook. Phenomenal. Outlook, Word document, macro, PowerShell, ret.space, port 8080, downloaded resume.exe, executed payload. That's what we know. That's awesome. And you know what? Years past, that would be enough. Or we would think it's enough, right? So here's the summary. We've got the user, Outlook, resume.m, Windward, macro, PowerShell, ret.space, and resume.exe. Are we done? Do you think? No, we're just getting started. The other thing you can do is jump into ThreatGrid, or malware secure analytics now, right? It used to be called ThreatGrid, it's called malware secure analytics. But you can jump in here. Your investigations may take you into all kinds of different tools, right? The idea here is to simplify as you move along. Now I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly, but here you got, anybody use malware, you guys? Yeah? So it's an outside looking in sandbox. There's nothing in the virtual execution space to allow malware writers to know that they're being monitored. So we extract the drivers, we create dynamic data in it. It looks and feels and smells like a real machine, right? And why is so they don't look for virtual drivers and then become dormant, and then later on it executes on an asset that doesn't have virtual drivers and creates chaos. But it's a way of evading the sandboxing capability. So the nice thing about this is all of our samples that are happening in the organization. You've got risk, threat scores, total submissions. This I love, right? So if you started here and you had a file name or SHA-256 in our example, and you put it in, that internal targets is telling me with that integrated architecture, platform-based approach to security, that I have one internal target. This could be 5, this could be 10, this could be whatever. It could be 0. But at least now, even looking at my sandbox, just to do the analysis portion, I get some good insight here. Threat score, you got some metadata around it. You got MITRE ATT&CK framework that's aligned to it. All great stuff. We can drill down into the actual behavioral indicators. We end up finding out there's some mutex, some remote control, key logging, so all kinds of different capabilities. Remember, this is that forensic data, right? This is the blood and the fingerprints, right? And the hair follicle. These are all pieces I can use to determine if I'm at risk. And so when I drop this down, I can take execution, or I can perform an action against it. So I can do some remediation, I can do additional investigation and pivot right from here. And I could do that with not only Cisco, but also third-party technologies that you do integrate. Umbrella tells us that it's been blocked. Some good information here. You got TCP streams. I'm going a little bit quick here because this is all the meat and the details, but it's all here, right? Extracted domains. You've got processes, the parent process. You've got resume.exe again shows up here. And again, it shows up as red, so we know. Oh, wrong one. So you see that that's a skull, right? And these little arrows drop down and you can take action against it. But now I know there's 3 elements here that are malicious, right? Just by that alone. All right, so we move along. There's things like registry entries, created, deleted, etc. The video, You can play back the video. You can actually resubmit the malware sample if it was automatically submitted, so you can actually interact, because sometimes you have to invoke a behavior from malware. But this shows us what the user had seen. MITRE attack framework, some alignment there. Again, all of this is intelligence for us to understand how the adversary, if I can block at the tactic or technique or sub-technique level, it's very hard for the adversary to overcome, right? DNS, IP, SHAs, all of that can change, right? Easily and evade. But if I can get up to the TTP level, it makes it very difficult for the adversary to overcome that. So it gives us some information. We can pivot into MITRE as well. So we're drilling into it. And then what we can do is from here, we can do what we call as orbital scan, right? Scan the environment. Why? Because we saw mutex. So that's residual. That's that little hair follicle that fell on the carpet, right? We want to find that. Is it anywhere else? Maybe they've cleaned up their tracks. They got rid of resume.exe. Or maybe that SHA has changed many times, right, since then. So I can check to look for that mutex against all my assets, and maybe then I find or discover a couple more. Maybe, maybe not. I also may want to take action. So the ability to be able to take action against an asset, whether that be a forensic scan. These are some of the details that are here. Nice thing about that is, again, it's showing you when you're looking at any files, logged in users, PowerShell, all of that stuff's all included in that forensic scan, that I can see visually that these are all green. So these are good samples. If it's unknown or malware, red, obviously I want to pay attention to that. All the details to support what we're seeing there. Then you get isolation. You could do that based on a severity level. So if something hits as high, maybe you want to isolate it automatically. You can also do it manually within endpoint detection and response. You can also take a forensic scan from endpoint detection and response. All right, we're still moving along. You can then dump something to threat grid automatically for analysis. Again, that's an kind of after the fact approach, but still worthy of doing. And then you finally got the ability to move into maybe a more restricted grouping. So if you're triaging an asset, maybe you want to restrict its ability, to communicate to other assets or run additional engines that are on it, right? So this is going to focus on the endpoint AMP capability, but you might want to drive a network outcome to that too with integration with things like Identity Services Engine. All right, so we've got a whole bunch of new information, right? We've got behavioral indicators, we've got the mutex, we've got remote command shell, keylogger. It gives us an idea what the adversary was up to. We got MITRE attack framework, we got networking scripts, macros, and PowerShell. Woohoo! Right? We're done now, right? No, because we need another 20 minutes. I'm way over time. No, we're not done. This is good. This is all great information. You can use this to defend or add additional defensive capabilities. But there's still more to the story. And so you want to start looking across the entire ecosystem of capabilities. So malware, IPS events, intelligence, endpoint, DNS, forensics. You want tactics, techniques, IP addresses, emails. You want systematic response, you want orchestration, you want automation. You want to be able to have all these capabilities and pooled into one. And that's where you get into threat response, or XDR, extended detection response. So I want to take this, and this has got to include not only Cisco technologies, but third party, because not everybody's going to throw away everything they own to buy Cisco. Some people might be very happy with what they own today and just want the integration. And SecureX is going to allow you to do that and leverage threat response to do your hunting with it. And so now what we want to do is we jump into the portal and we start asking some questions. And it's going to real time go out to all of these different sources, pull that data back and give you a real sense of what's happening. And so when I look at resume.exe, it shows me a relations graph of all the relationships between file names, processes. So here we've got PowerShell and that SHA-256, which is resume.exe. So that's good, but we already know all that, right? EDR has provided us that data already. So we haven't learned anything new, except it's a nice visual. And again, these little arrows or little dots, you can actually pivot into and take action. So the other thing we want to look up to add to this investigation is ret.space, right? We know that that's a domain that's bad, right? So let's look it up. So we see PowerShell has a relationship with ret.space. That's true. And we see 2 more endpoints. Interesting, right? Has no relationship to resume.exe or that SHA-256. None. Why? Well, we don't know, right? We'd probably have to investigate that. But maybe the SHA has changed, right, over time. Maybe they were compromised with an earlier version of that file. But now we know there's 2 more endpoints. Resume.m, that's that macro, right? So what's the relationship there? Well, again, stuff we already know. We know Outlook had a relationship with resume.m. We know the file name. All good, right? But this is where it gets interesting. This is where we expand it. So we've already identified 2 new assets at the top, but now we've got the email associated. So we knew it came in with Outlook, but we didn't have any details around it. Now we do. We know that it's sent to 2 users, not 1, John and Jason. I'm not very creative, guys. So IP addresses that sent the message, right? I've got an email subject line. I've got a suspect domain or URL that's part of the message in the body. I also see an unknown URL in the body that an IP internally had connected to. Wow, right? Like that really changes the story completely. You went home too early, right? Can you do this today? Can you systemically go out and understand what's happening in your entire environment, pull it all the pieces together and get a good understanding to start mitigating risk? It's a tough business. The defensive side is definitely tough. We also know email is muhahaha@bad.com. Hey, no problem. Okay, I know. Okay, so look at all the information we get. And again, we can pivot at any point in time. Anytime you see that little arrow down, I know it's a circle here, but the arrow down, you can pivot, take action, jump into threat grid, jump into endpoint amp, jump into umbrella, block in umbrella. You know, you can take all kinds of actions. But now we know there's more to the story, right? This now provides us a holistic view of what might have happened. The thing is we still have more to do, but we just don't have more time, right? We probably want to find out what's happening on those 2 endpoints. Why was that IP talking to that unknown URL? And what about that suspected URL? Should we investigate that, right? So there might be more to the story. And so these attributes that we're learning about we'll probably want to add to our investigation. But it gives us a little bit more perspective because now we know muhahaha@bad.com. Went to John and Jason, specifically John. John opened the email. Outlook was invoked, obviously, because it was an email. Resume.m, winword.exe, macro, PowerShell, ret.space, download the executable, and start that process automatically. Now, I'm not going to be able to get to the threat demo. But the threat demo was actually going to go through and take intelligence from a third party, so it'll be part of the deck. But it takes intelligence from the third party, consumes that intelligence. It looks like it's suspect or suspicious. It's malware or risky. We see it as suspicious. And so I go through the sandbox environment where I show you that why we have it as suspicious and another third-party source looked at it as malicious was because the URL was no longer active. Right, so it's intelligence. Getting intelligence is one thing, but actionable intelligence is more important. And so if you would have started thinking that you were at risk, and we have to take the side of caution, so we have to show you as as malicious, right? Because we have to take the most riskiest analysis of that data. And then the analyst comes in and reviews it and determines what really happened. And if you don't have these tools, you might be doing things or blocking things that may no longer be, in fact, at risk. And you might say, well, what's the big deal? Well, maybe you are putting production at risk at this point in time. So if you want, this is certainly on YouTube already. So if you want to look at that video, you can see the product there that we're enriching. But the way you got to look at SecureX and XDR, it's free with investments in Cisco security. And you are not bound by Cisco technologies only. So conclusion, Cisco provides endpoint detection and response. It's good, great technology, but it's only as good as the assets installed on. There's a ton of other assets. In fact, assets outside of traditional PCs are now outweighing the PC in the environment, right? There's more OT devices in the environment than traditional PCs, right? Or user-based systems. Or will be if your environment's not like that. Sandboxing provides additional insight and context. Endpoint eval, automated response, forensic scan, isolation. More to the story, always more to the story. There's even more to the story to what we've seen today. XDR kind of pulls everything together, including third-party integrations. And then finally, having the ability to orchestrate and automate. So what you might want to do, we saw some of that in endpoint detection response, but you might want to get a little bit more sophisticated and say if something happened on the network, a behavior was indicated, it tells a system, that system then, SecureX, takes a bunch of actions, right? It maybe grabs that intelligence, feeds it into other intelligence platforms, automatically runs it, creates a WebEx Teams room automatically, puts the security analysts in that room, dumps the data and the findings into that room, and allows you to start the triage process of understanding what might take place, right? So that's where the orchestration and automation certainly can come in. Threat hunting services is something that Cisco also provides as well as part of the EDR offering. So surveys, they're pretty big on surveys. So, and this is a reference architecture that Cisco's put together just recently, and it looks at all different perspectives, whether it be SASE, zero trust, etc. Learn, learn, learn. And here's continue, and then the thank you. So thank you, guys. I know it's late. It's probably first time that many of you have traveled. I know for me, right, wearing masks on planes, multiple hours. It's tough, right? And it's not the same as it used to be. This is the first time I've been in front of anybody in 2.5 years. So I am honored to be at Cisco Live and have a chance to talk with all of you today. So thanks.
Cisco SecureX, threat hunting example using third-party integration, Palo Alto's autofocus capability. So we're going to import this snapshot that includes the module. This is fed in through Palo Alto, or the intelligence is supported by Palo Alto's autofocus capability. You can see this here. It's marked as malicious. We can pivot right into the tool for Palo Alto, but what we want to do is look at this from an extended detection and response perspective. Verdicts, sightings, indicators, threat context. We're going to look at all of that, but we want to look at it from the perspective of our entire environment. That URL alone, is there more to the story here? And that's what we want to find out. So can we make other tools better? I think we can. So let's go through this. So from here, we can do the things that we normally do. We're going to unblock or block this domain. I blocked it previously. That's why it's showing as blocked and then unblocked. But we're going to make sure that we're going to block it here. We can also jump into secure malware analytics for sandboxing, whether we want to browse or search or actually send the URL to the sandbox to be detonated. We're going to do that here. So there's Cisco Malware Analytics Platform, formerly ThreatGrid. You can see there's one submission happening right here, but we're going to do this right from SecureX. We're going to go in, we're going to submit the URL to ThreatGrid. We'll go ahead and click that. We can see success here, but success, let's see if that really is. So we'll refresh this and look at that. There it is. It's already being submitted. So we didn't have to drag and push this into another product, or we were able to drive an outcome right from SecureX. Now, while that's happening, we're going to go ahead and create a new case. And that case is what we're going to work on here. So we've got the ribbon at the bottom. There's the actual URL that we've entered. We can actually do things like maybe we'll just grab the domain here. And we can go up to enrich and do a quick search. We've got one observation. So you can screen scrape something and put it in there. We're going to add it to this case. And now we've got a domain and we've got that URL. And from here, what we could do is investigate it in threat response. Give it a name. We'll come back to that a little bit later. We can add some notes. We're going to do that as well. But let's go ahead and investigate that. And look at that. We have that URL. And we also have an asset that was talking to the domain itself. Now, from here, we have the ability to do some things as well, including take a forensic snapshot, maybe isolate the host. All of these are options with SecureX orchestration. These are workflows that are built. We're going to come back and actually do that in a little bit. Let's go back to the malware analytics platform, so the sandbox, and let's have a look at our submission. And you can see it's still running here. And the nice thing about this is called Glovebox, and I have the ability to come in here and interact with it. Sometimes malware, you may need to do something. There's a lot of automation in the platform, but at times you might need somebody to come in and invoke a certain behavior, do something, and maybe something bad will happen. And then obviously everything's getting recorded. We're going to look at all the details in a minute. So you can see here, I just went to that domain directly, and this is going to finish up here in a second, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into the report. Now, there's not a whole lot here with this particular URL that we submitted, but there's some interesting data points regardless. So you see behavioral indicators, you can see HTTP traffic, and you can see that little drop down arrow as well. Like at any point in time, if there is that exists, like you can see that here, I can actually take action right from here. Now I'm in the malware analytics platform, so I pivoted from SecureX, but I still have the ability to take action in this portal. I continue to scroll down, extracted domains, processes, we've got artifacts, everything that happened is recorded, right? Registry entry, so activities around, created keys, modified keys, deleted keys, and then you get all the file activities associated to it. One thing that's really cool is that we can come in here and look at the anything that's aligns to the MITRE attack framework. So here we can see, a tactic called defense evasions. It's obfuscated files or information. Try to say that 10 times. And I can pivot right into MITRE, learn a little bit about it. Again, not a whole lot happening here. All right, so that's the report. Great. Let's go ahead and maybe we can update some notes here of what we found so far. So we'll go ahead and put in our timeline. Paulo sees a threat and investigated it in autofocus. Then we ran the URL in threat grid, and the score report came back as 48. And maybe what we want to do is grab the actual link to that and let's enter it back into our notes section of this case book. And then the domain is not accessible. We saw it didn't actually resolve. And maybe that's a good indication of why it scored fairly low in threat grid or malware or secure malware analytics platform. So I'm just going to give this a name, Paulo autofocus. That's where the source started from. Now, what we could do here is we can come in and we could actually take a forensic snapshot. And there we go. We've started that, but let's go ahead and jump to Orbital. Again, this is some additional integration, and we can see that snapshot actually taking place right now. Now, this will take a few minutes to actually run the snapshot, and we're going to go through the snapshot together here. There's a ton of data, so bear with me. There's SHA-256s, the hash is running, but look at here, I can also take action. The green means good, right? Gray means unknown, and then red would mean bad. So I can see that right here in the interface. I get into shared resources, application shims, log on sessions. I've got logged in users. I've got recent file data. And again, you can see it's rendering and it's providing us insight into whether or not these are potentially malicious. Now look at this. All the PowerShell history is here as well. Now you might be wondering, okay, wait a minute. How did you do the forensic snapshot? What did that have to do with maybe Palo Alto's autofocus? Well, it had nothing to do with it. They fed us the data. We've used the data to scour the infrastructure, and we've made a determination that we wanted to take a forensic snapshot against an endpoint that has Cisco Secure Endpoint on it. And that's how we've drove this particular outcome. But again, forensically, in an investigation, forensically, this becomes critical data that you want to get. Whether you're on-prem or off-prem, this is some data that you certainly want to capture. Now, you might want to also have isolated the host, and we could have done that as well. In this case, all I did was take a forensic snapshot. You've got user groups, you've got Windows open shares, loaded modules and the hashes assigned to them. And it goes on and on and on. Scheduled tasks. And then finally, we're coming towards the end with temp directory file data.